Pakistan at 65%. 65%, meaning more likely than not, you're having sex with your cousin, and if you're not, you're the weird one. Compared to Christian countries, let's take a look. Usually less than 1%.
Less than 1%, guys, but it gets worse. Why do Christians have less than 1% inbreeding rates? We'll see.
Daniel, the floor is all yours for your 15-minute opener. Thanks for being with us.
Just a quick note. I want this to be a civil debate because right now there's a massive Zionist campaign to generate as much hostility between Muslims and Christians as possible. If I can say something nice about Andrew, I respect him for not being a shill for Israel. I think we can be civil, but also very critical of each other's religions without it turning vicious. The only ones who benefit from a Muslim-Christian civil war right now is Israel, which is stoking hate so that they can continue their genocide of both Muslim and Christian Palestinians while they bleed America dry. Let's keep that larger context in mind. So the first slide, which is best for society, Islam or Christianity? Next slide. The answer depends on which standard we use to judge, traditional or secular liberal values. Traditional values include belief in God, prayer, marriage, and gender roles, opposition to degeneracy, and commitment to nation and shared culture. Secular liberal values include individual freedom, gender equality, sexual autonomy, scientific progress, and economic advancement. If we judge by traditional values, Islam beats Christianity hands down. If we judge by secular liberal values, Christianity comes out on top. The reason for this is that Christianity, since the Enlightenment, has been reformed and adopted liberal values while eroding traditional ones. This is because Christianity is more open to evolving in a way that Islam isn't. My opponent, Andrew Wilson, claims to be a traditional Christian, but we'll see if he'll debate like a traditional Christian or like a blue-haired libtard. If he debates as a traditional Christian, he should defend Christianity. He should defend Christianity as understood.
Okay, so first of all, we have to say that we had to kind of give, that was kind of funny, okay? The only real point I will give to Hikikachu throughout the whole entire debate was that I'm actually glad he brought this sort of icebreaker at the start here. It was kind of funny. He's got the libtard Andrew versus the trad Andrew. Objectively, that's pretty funny. So I enjoyed that. It was a good little jab without getting like really personal or anything like that. So, you know, I enjoyed this part of the debate. It was funny because, you know, that's what debates are about. So I did enjoy this part of it. And libtard Andrew does look pretty funny. Libtard Andrew does look pretty funny.
He should defend Christianity. He should defend Christianity as understood before modern liberal reforms. For example, even though...
But the main reason I enjoyed it is because it really does come back to bite him.
Though he's Orthodox, I doubt he'll defend Byzantine Orthodox norms, such as theocratic monarchy, the monarch's authority to define church doctrine, slavery, book bans and speech restrictions, death penalties for blasphemy, apostasy, and pagan worship, restrictions and bans on loaning money with interest, minimum marriage age of 12, bans on divorce, mandatory veiling of women with unveiled women labeled as prostitutes, lashes for fornicators, punishing married adulterers by cutting off noses or sewing them into sacks and burning them alive, execution for homosexual acts, limits on Jews through bans on Jewish proselytizing and building new synagogues. If we look at a timeline of Christianity, for 1700 years, Christianity upheld its pre-modern norms of slavery, female subordination, monarchy, punishments for blasphemy, executions for adultery. After the Enlightenment, Christians began reforming their religion to match secular values, and that liberalizing process continues today with the acceptance of homosexuality, LGBT rights, and modern feminism. Even though he's a conservative, Andrew already accepts huge chunks of this liberal reform. He's fine with abolishing slavery, rejecting monarchy, ending blasphemy, and adultery punishments. His conservatism simply draws an arbitrary line at a later stage, roughly 1950s America. But libtard progressives follow that same reform trajectory, just a few stages or steps further. Andrew isn't defending traditional Christianity, he's defending his preferred arbitrary stopping point on a progressive path he already agrees with. In other words, the difference between him and the libtards is quantitative, not qualitative. Just a dispute over where to halt the same ongoing cucking to secular liberalism. So Andrew's conservatism is not principled, it's arbitrary. Given this, I predict Andrew will debate like a blue-haired libtard today and use a pro-liberal strategy against Islam.
Now, if I were Daniel Hikikachu going into this debate, I'm not going to lie to you guys. I probably would have gone with the same line of attack. How else is he going to defend it? It's the only really thing that they've got. It's that, like, you know, we're based compared to you guys. We've got the higher birth rates and we have our women in line and we don't have the degeneracy in our societies that you guys have. How can you possibly argue against that? But we preempted this. You know? The idea here, like, because, you know, obviously when we're doing this debate prep, it's, you know, Andrew, myself, and Rob and Rachel, and we're just going and trying to hit him with every single scenario possible. I'm trying to say, well, he might attack it from this way, this way, this way. I'm playing Daniel Hikikachu. Rob playing Daniel Hikikachu. And we're trying to go with every single scenario possible. So obviously we went through this scenario in depth.
Because again, Christianity can't beat Islam on traditional values for the simple reason that Islam isn't amenable to reform the way Christianity is. So he'll likely attack Islam exactly like a blue-haired alphabet person would by calling Islam backwards on marriage, gender roles, and scientific and economic progress. But if Andrew attacks Islam using secular liberal values, he faces a dilemma. Because tomorrow he's debating an atheist on whether Christianity or secular liberalism is better for society. So any pro-liberal standard that Andrew uses to judge Islam today, tomorrow that same liberal standard can be used by his atheist opponent to judge Christianity. For example, if he says Christianity is better than Islam because it gives women more rights and promotes more scientific progress and health, the atheist can argue that secular liberalism does even more of those things. Andrew knows this, so against the atheist tomorrow, he'll likely revert back to a traditional Christian stance, highlighting issues like LGBT, incest, and low birth rates. I'm not singling out Andrew. All Christian debaters code switch. They know Christianity isn't as based as Islam on traditional values, nor as progressive as secularism on liberal values. Christianity is stuck in the middle between traditionalism and secularism. So to win against either Islam or secularism, Christians have no choice but to code switch depending on who they're debating. Putting aside this conceptual problem with Christian apologetics, how do we know that Islam is better for society than Christianity? Again, it depends on what values we adopt. Muslim and Christians generally subscribe to traditional values. In fact, all humans, due to biology, inherently value things like belief in a creator, marriage, family, and community. So let's see whether Islam or Christianity is better at promoting these things in society using the abundance of empirical data available.
Now, guys, I am going to skip the rest of it because I think that everybody pretty much gets the crux of what he's saying, in that all these different areas, the Muslims are better because they're more based, okay? You get the point. He just goes through a bunch of it, and, you know, he says that they're so much more based in all these cultural areas. Okay. Now, with that in mind, Andrew Wilson, is he going to debate like a libtard? Is he going to say, well, you know, we're nicer to women and the gays? We'll see.
Good job, man. The fun thing about debate is you get to actually get in the mind of your opponent. What? What happened?
The slide is showing, which James didn't include in this, but I think that they're going to include it, which is Andrew's slideshow, which I don't know why they included his whole slideshow, but then not Andrew's. But I can kind of take you guys through it because I was helping out with the slideshow, what it all says. So everyone's laughing because they can see the slideshow appearing, which says Islam and the societies that they've created with a bunch of people who look, you'll see.
Oh. The fun thing about debate is you get to actually get in the mind of your opponent. You get to study and dissect the things that they say and believe. After watching Daniel for hours, a few things became obvious. The first, he's a far better Muslim apologist than I am a Christian apologist, that's for sure. But he's far weaker on politics than myself and the nature of the world. The second is that he's an above-average debater, but he ain't quite God tier. See, If I were Daniel and fighting from his worldview, I'd point out Christianity is fractured and weak, that Christianity is totally incapable of fighting back against the degeneracy of our time.
This is all coming from the opening statement. I saw somebody comment on the modern day debate video. Oh, well, you know, he's pulled this from Daniel's. No. This was in the opening statement before he heard what Daniel had to say. So just make sure that we've got that right.
Its impotence has led to social categories of degeneracy at levels nobody could have predicted, especially with the advent of the internet. I would point out Muslim societies don't work that way, that Muslims have feminism and degens under control, that everything in modern day Christians in the West are fighting for against degeneracy, Islam has already achieved in their lands. That's what I would do if I were Daniel. When talking about which is better for society, Islam or Christianity, this becomes a powerful argument. But I'd go a step further if I were Daniel. I'd also say my opponent will argue like an atheist progressive, that Andrew Wilson, the guy who promotes anti-feminist and egalitarian doctrine, is going to sit up here and act like an egalitarian progressive and cry about Islam being mean to the women and cry about Islam not being very nice to the gays. Well, you were fucking wrong. Sadly for Daniel, while this tactic would normally be effective against a sewing circle Christian, I'm not part of that cast, sir. Now, let me get into my argument for why Christianity makes better societies than Islam, and it's pretty simple.
And this is where the argument comes in, ladies and gentlemen. This is where the argument comes in. If I can say, I think this argument has sent Islam even further back than the Stone Ages, even further back, okay? This argument is not good for Islam, ladies and gents.
Islamic societies breed an inbred population. Next slide, please. Muslim inbreeding has been occurring at a high rate for about 1,400 years since the early Islamic period, encompassing most of the land still occupied by Islam today. It spread from the 8th to the 15th century, moved into Persia, North Africa, South Asia, where it remains and has created some of the dumbest human beings on planet Earth. The most common type of inbreeding is first cousin marriage. The rates of first cousin marriage in comparison to Christian nations is staggeringly high, even in comparison to regions occupied by Arab Christians. When a nation has both Christians and Muslims, Muslims are often double or higher than Christians. Example, India, Lebanon. Next slide, please. Pakistan at 65%. 65%, meaning more likely than not, you're having sex with your cousin, and if you're not, you're the weird one. Okay? For the low IQ members of MDD, that means these people are more likely than not having sex with their aunts or uncles' children. Saudi Arabia, 50 to 58%, with an average 76 IQ. Who would have thunk it? UAE, 54%, 82 IQ. The crown jewel of the Arab world, you are more likely than not to be your first cousin. Iran, 40%, 80 IQ. Yemen, 45%, 62.9 IQ. Qatar, 30%, 80.8 IQ.
And it just keeps going, guys. Like, this is such a brutality, this argument. Because let's say it was like 3, 4, 5, even 10%. Maybe there could be an argument against it. Well, it's not really that common. How can you make the argument that IQ is actually correlated with this when it's a lower percent? But even if not, guys, even if it was 50%, the problem that you'd have here is it's like, okay, all of this inbreeding happens, but you could blame other things. You could blame, you know, lack of resources because of, you know, the financial situations in those countries and the amount of poverty. But there is actually a causative link here, which is even worse for them. It's not just that there's correlation, that we have causation here. So check it out.
Now, we're going to continue, right? Oman, 36%, 78. Syria, 39%, 74 IQ. Turkey, 25%, 86 IQ. Jordan, 32%, 80 IQ. Egypt, 32%, 76 IQ. It goes on and on and on, and it just never gets better. Next slide, please. Thank you. Compared to Christian countries, let's take a look. Usually less than 1%. Now, I wonder why Christians build better societies, ladies.
Less than 1%, guys. But it gets worse. Why do Christians have less than 1% inbreeding rates? We'll see.
Now, let's keep going. We want to pull up the slide here, moving right along. As countries become more Christian, inbreeding declines. right? We can see this from church intervention in Spain, 20 to 30% post-Reconquista. Catholic Church banned cousin marriages for commoners, papal dispensations sold for royals. Italy, similar high rates in the medieval period. The church enforced bans over the century. France, high medieval. Canon law prohibited marriage within 4 degrees of relation. Modern Western Europe, it's not just the cultural norm, but let me tell you exactly how much of a cultural norm it is. Even in European nations where marrying your first cousin is legal, they don't do it because of the ecclesiology. Isn't that wild? Africa shows the more Christians and less Muslim the societies become, the better they do. Let's just take a look at Nigeria. Okay, we can go down the list here. 50% Nigeria, 20 to 30% first cousin marriage. Isn't that crazy? Now let's move right on down. You can see South Africa, Muslim 1.5%, very low on to negligible in the national prevalence of cousin. Whew. You can look at the list. It's pretty comprehensive. We can continue to go, right? The bottom 20 least productive sub-Saharan.
Daniel is I think I might be able to see a bead of sweat coming down from his left eye. Look at the body language. This is a man who is like, oh, shit. How do I get myself out of this one?
We can continue to go, right? The bottom 20 least productive sub-Saharan African countries. Wouldn't you know it? They're all Muslim. 99% Muslim in Somalia. Whew, very high. 60% first cousins. Anybody ever hear a joke about Somalian IQ? Let's look over at Niger, 99% Muslim, 60% cousin marriage. First cousin marriage. Let's take a look at Muslims. When we're taking a look at Malil, it's a 90% population, high cousin marriage. In other words, everywhere Islam goes, the IQ goes like this because they all are their cousins, not joking. Go over to the next slide, please. I want to show you this is a famous case. These are called the rat people of Pakistan. It's a condition known as microphalics. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I have no idea. And it's caused by excessive inbreeding. When's the last time you went to a European country and saw that? You don't see it. Inbreed, yeah. Now, hang on. Next slide, please. As we continue, let's just take a look here at the casual link between cousin and low IQ. Basically, there's increased homozygosity, I think that's how it's pronounced, for deleterious recessive genes, and it is the strongest causal link for why the IQs are so low. Genetic risk. Inbreeding raises the chances of inheriting 2 copies of harmful recessive genes. Brain development impact. Harmful genes can impair neurodevelopment, reducing cognitive potential. IQ reduction evidence, first cousin offspring lose 3 to 4 points on average, and closer inbreeding can cause larger deficits. They've been at it for 1,400 years. Whew.
So just to make the point there, that there is an exponential growth, if you will, if you a cousin over a few generations. So you lose a few IQ points, and then the next generation you'll lose more and more and more and more and more. And they've been doing it for 1,400 years, guys. Brutality. And in some of these places, over 50% cousin marriages. And this is not even accounting for like the siblings. And then this is not even accounting for like the second cousins and stuff. This is first cousin marriage.
Prevalence equals greater risk. Populations with widespread cousin marriage show more individuals with lower cognitive performance. Generational compounding over successful generations. Harmful genes accumulate. One of the big Muslim copes you'll hear from Daniel tonight. Well, it's only 1.5% for genetic problems for normal people who aren't having sex with their first cousin. Well, that's true. He says it only doubles to 3%. That's very low. No, it compounds. See, if you hump your first cousin and then those kids hump their first cousin and their kids are et cetera, et cetera, et cetera down the line, guess what happens to your IQ? Guess what? You'll never guess. Anybody got a guess? It goes down. The negative.
More and more and more and more and more. Which cuts off any avenue that Daniel has to then come out and say, well, it only does, it doesn't really affect them that much, The generational argument.
Consequences of a low IQ.
Intergenerational
80 IQ
cousin
versus 100 IQ person. Income 50 to 70% lower. Welfare dependency 4 to 6 times higher. Literacy less than 10% at less than 85 IQ. Obesity up almost 2 times. Chronic disease up almost 2.5 times. Life expectancy less than 70 IQ or 75 IQ, down 5 to 10 years. Why? Because, well, you might just look down the barrel of that shotgun when you're cleaning it. Moving over. Arrests and incarcerations 3 to 8 times higher. Violent offenses 4 to 6 times higher. Teen pregnancy 3 times higher. Child neglect and abuse 3 to 7 times higher. Intergenerational poverty 4 to 6 times. Almost every study available shows that IQ entering the low 80s, Muslim countries, affects nearly every aspect of life in a negative way. Economic prospects, criminality, mental, physical health, happiness metrics, and both at the individual and societal level. In fact, study shows that when a country has a sub-90 IQ average, they find it difficult to have basic innovation, infrastructure, professional class, and other basic needs of a functional society. Is that sounding familiar yet? Now, here's the thing that's interesting. Modern societies don't require everyone to be a genius. Just look at me. But they do rely on a distribution of abilities, and you can see their roles below. 70 to 85, basic job, practical skills.
This is really important, okay? So one of the things we looked at in preparation was, what does it actually take to create a Western society, like a functioning Western society that we have now? Well, they can actually break this down with data, right? So we'll go back a little bit here, and we'll see whereabouts the sort of like labor jobs will be, and then where the managerial jobs will be, the sort of middle management jobs, and then eventually where the C-suite jobs are in terms of IQ, and then where the sort of innovators and the entrepreneurs and these things are. And this is what you need to have a functioning civilization.
Distribution of abilities, and you can see their roles below. 70 to 85, basic job, practical skills, routine labor. That's Islam. That's almost every Islamic nation, ladies and gentlemen, 70 to 85. Sometimes up to 2 standard deviations lower. Whew. 85 to 100 would be skilled labor administrative support, 100 to 115 professional middle management, 115 to 130 engineers, scientists, doctors, specialized roles, the things they desperately need that they get from us. 130 plus innovation, leadership, high-level problem solving. Next slide, please. Inbreeding itself over generations causes massively compounds that lead to negative consequences. And you can see the risk curve there. You see how the genetic defects increase every single generation. Moving over, I just want to point this out on the last slide. Islam took an ethnic people that were at the heart of being the top of civilization, and through generations of Islam and inbreeding has turned them into the lowest IQ, some of the stupidest people on planet Earth. Literally. You think I'm being mean. I'm not. They're literally some of the stupidest people on planet Earth. Everywhere Islam goes, inbreeding increases and societies become worse. Where Christianity goes, inbreeding decreases, so societies do better in almost every material way. Let's just point out here, as I wrap this up. So it's clear here that my argument summarized, though this isn't its entirety, is that Islam creates huge societies with large swaths of people with IQs so collectively low, they would be considered developmentally challenged, borderline here in the West. Not kidding.
Collectively.
Due to this side effect, force doctrine becomes the order of the day.
And this is where we tie the bow on the argument, right? So we've gone through the whole IQ thing, why they have a lower IQ due to inbreeding, why there is a causal link there, not just correlation, okay? Why you actually need a certain IQ to have a more developed society. You can't have it when it's lower, because then they just become a collective labor force. And now we tie the bow on it. Force doctrine is obviously Andrew's idea that men grant women rights because men have a monopoly on force, so they grant women rights. How does it apply to Islam? You might have already figured it out, but let's check it.
Because the technological difference in capabilities of each people group is so vastly different, think Apollo mission compared to Starship Enterprise, Islam must literally bank on the benevolence of Christians to not wipe them off the face of planet Earth. They are basically the feminists of the East, totally reliant on the goodwill and benevolence of global Christianity, not to just not exterminate them.
The feminists of the East. The feminists of the East. But the reason why this is such a brutal argument is because one of the things that a lot of people say, and I've actually, thought about this, like that this is a reason why Islam is such a threat. It's because they're outbreeding everybody and their populations are going to continue to grow. They're going to continue coming into Western countries. But it's like, if they have these low IQs, then they actually can't create functioning civilizations. And they're always going to be at the mercy of these civilizations because these civilizations are going to have a monopoly on the levers of force in the modern world, which is technology. So what are they going to do? They're going to rely on coming into these Western countries and just sort of like building mosques and then using brute force. But that's not going to work when they're up against a much more sophisticated enemy. And as they come into these countries more, their enemies get more and more sophisticated. So,
okay. And take their resources, always appealing to the mightier force for their existence and the benevolence of that very people group who Daniel today is arguing doesn't make better societies, which is a laughable proposition. Even absent the degeneracy of a people group must be able to competently defend itself or bank on the benevolence of the people group, which can. And almost everybody is going to prefer the society that can. Imagine the irony here of arguing against the very Christians you find inadequate morally, yet bank on their moral benevolence to not off the face of planet Earth. Thank you.
So that is the opening statement. Actually, the Muslims rely on the benevolence of the Christian societies who are much more higher IQ and are much more technologically developed. Isn't it just beautiful? You love it.